you guys, I'm here with my mini album that I created for my Teddy Boo, which was the Storefront mini. I shared with you guys last week the video on how this was, or like a step through video. I'll put a link to that video down in the description so that you can take a look at it. And today I'm going to teach you one of the techniques that I did in this mini, on this mini page to help make this kind of come together. This is the candy store. And if you notice in the window, try and get it to focus. In the window, I have a cake stand. So I'm going to show you guys how I made that cake stand. And I'm also going to share with you today how I made the table that is holding the sign. They're both the same technique. And in another video, I will share with you how I made the little tiny roses and the actual sign that's on the table. I have a video on my channel that shows how to make the poinsettia, so I'll put a link to that down in the description. So let's get started. The biggest thing I want to talk to you about today is just taking your stamps and really paying attention to their shapes more than paying attention to the purpose the artist had for those stamps. I know a lot of times we get so caught up in the stamps, you know, or for a certain thing, or you know, you just don't really think about it. Well, when I was working on this album, I needed a cake stand and I needed a table, and I couldn't find anything online or any kind of Jolie's that I was really interested in looking at. So I decided to make my own, and I pulled out all my stamps and I started paying attention to them, and I noticed that on the Parisian Anthology stamp set there is kind of a cake stand, and it doesn't quite fit what I needed. It's not quite long enough to be a table, but it definitely has a nice look to it. So I decided to use it and maybe, you know, spruce it up just a bit. So this is how I did it. I'm going to use the cake stand, and I'm also going to use this little filigree piece here at the bottom. Now what you're going to need is some kind of embossing ink. I'm going to use my Versa ink pad. And you also need the two stamps, and you'll also need some kind of embossing powder. And then I just have thin manila cardstock. This is just a piece from my scrap. And actually, in the window, I actually stamped directly onto the back on the chipboard. On the table, I stamped onto a really thin piece of chipboard, which was cereal box, I believe. So let's get started. And what you're going to do is really think about the layering effects that are going to happen with these stamps. So on the first one, let's make the table first. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take and stamp. Be careful when you're stamping that you're not going to stamp this section at the bottom. So I'm just going to grab a paper towel, place it over that part of the image, and then I'm going to stamp right on there. Now what that does is that protects that oil from the embossing ink from getting onto the stamp. And I'm going to stamp that directly onto my paper. And I don't know if you can see it or not, but there's definitely only the tabletop and part of the stand. Now this time I am going to stamp only the stand. So I'm going to put my paper towel over the top. Now realize that you might want to clean this stamp off before you do your next image, because that embossing ink is oil based and it could linger on these clear stamps. So I'm just going to emboss this one this time. Now depending on the length you want, the length that you want the tabletop, this is what you do. I wanted my tabletop to be considerably longer than just 2 of these image stamps depth. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take and try and line this up with the stem above it, and I'm going to make sure you get it really straight, and I'm going to stamp down. Now they're lined up, they're even. However, notice that there is a gap in here between the base and the top. So I just took my Versa marker pen, and I'm going to basically just draw that line in. and try not to get it too thick. You don't want it to be too much thicker than what your table stand is. And then I'm going to take my embossing powder, which I'm going to use black today so that this shows up for you guys. And you're going to get the embossing powder on there. Now, notice there was a little bit of an overspray. That's okay, we can take care of that. No big deal. And get this really good on the side. Really good down at the feet. Okay, now all of this that's on the image that we don't want, like right here, just be real careful. Take a rough brush and just sweep it away. Again, right here, we're just going to take a rough brush and just sweep it away. Okay, and now we have our table. Now we have our table, but there's one more thing that we need to do. And don't worry about this being a mess because we're going to cut it. Excuse me, I have a bit of a cold today. Okay, so then here what we're going to do is we're going to take this filigree. Now you could have done this before you added the powder, but I wanted to show you guys the table before I added the filigree because this would be a really good like bar type table by itself. Now I'm going to take the filigree and I'm going to stamp it right over where the tabletop is, and this could be even added, you know, we could add a different embossing color to that to make it look like a tablecloth. Let's add white to that. Hold on. Let's see. Trying to find a scrap I can push that off on. Again, notice I didn't cover it up all the way, and if this is going to be a tablecloth, then we really want to make sure we get it complete coverage. So I'm just going to take my Versa ink pen and I'm just going to come back in where that didn't fill in, and I'm going to fill in with the Versa ink. I'm going to come back with this white fill it in. Oh, this is gonna look so pretty. Okay, bump all that extra off. Don't forget your paintbrush. Just bump all that extra off. And now let's heat emboss it. There you go. Okay, so now all you have to do is fussy cut this out. Now, obviously, I would have spent more time cutting this out if I were doing it on a project. I'm just trying to give you guys a rough look at what this is going to look like. But there you go. So now you have a really cute tabletop, a really nice doily. I'm going to trim this off just a little bit more. A really nice doily looking table covering on top of a table stand. Okay, so now to do the cake stand. Same technique, only this time what we're going to do is we're going to stamp the full stand. So this is the cake stand, and I'm going to stamp the full stand right here. Then this time I'm going to come back and only stamp, I'm going to really get this wiped off good. And I'm only going to stamp the top part of the stand with the stand itself. And I'm going to lay that down about right there. Just like that. And you can kind of see where that is. This time I want everything to be the same color. So I'm going to use my little filigree and I'm going to fill in over the top of this bottom part of the stand. I'm going to bring my black embossing powder back because that's the color I want. stuff is always a mess. And I told you guys, I am stamped challenge. I mean, if I can stamp, anybody can stamp. I'm just taking my paintbrush and wiping all that extra off. And I'm going to hit this with heat gun. And I'm going to fussy cut this image out. And as far as the decorations go on top of the cake stand, those were a Jolie's that were the little cakes and stuff. Those were a Jolie's that were actually on the I think it was a gingerbread man, a gingerbread house image from Jolie's, and I just cut all of the confections off the gingerbread house, and that's what I used on my cake stand. Sorry guys. I think I'm trying to catch pneumonia again. Now, on traditional cake stands, I'm going to show you this real quick. Usually when you have one at the top, it's a little bit smaller than the one at the bottom. So all I did was I took this and just kind of rounded it off a little bit so that my top one was a little bit smaller than my bottom one. So there you go, there's my cake stands, and then you got plenty of room in here for adding your tiny little cupcakes. And if you don't, just come back in here and trim this part right here down just a little bit. Just make sure you keep them even on both sides. Like that, and there you go. A little cute little cake stand. Hope you guys have enjoyed it.